Hey, hope you're having a wonderful day. This is Finx MTG here, and today I have a deck tech on Kotori Pilot Prodigy. This is a vehicle themed deck that is actually based on the Kotori precon that has been upgraded significantly to go in a bit of a new direction. So the great thing about this pilot here is that only costs 3 mana, 2/4, and vehicles you control have crew 2. So it doesn't matter if the crew ability on the vehicle says 8, you can utilize your commander to tap your commander and crew him 2 because it has 2 power, and then your vehicle is off to the races. The other feature of this is that at the beginning of combat on your turn, and remember this is a triggered ability, so you do have to remember to announce this and choose targets. Target artifact creature you control gains lifelink and vigilance until end of turn. So you target one of your vehicles that you have already crewed, and it becomes a massive swinging lifelink and vigilance creature until end of turn. So it's pretty good in that regard. And I've gained a lot of life in games with this one. I mean, I've had games where I went up to 60 life, or I even had one game where I went up to 100 life. And at this power level, it's really difficult for the opponents to wear that down. So again, since this is an upgraded precon version, this is more around a power level 5. And the idea is that you're playing against other kind of simple or budget decks. There's only about 3 or 4 cards in this deck that are over $10 in market value right now. So it's a very budget friendly option. And when you want to play against other these kind of advanced precons like the Warhammer ones, Lord of the Ring, Modern Horizons, they're a little bit more powerful. This deck can still fight against most of those. So let's go into the basic idea of what we want to do with this vehicle themed deck, right? This is level 5 going against other similar match decks. So again, we're not winning on turn 6 or 5 or 6, right? This is going into later games. And we're able to play cards like the Death Star here, Parhelion 2. So this is the most fun thing to do in the deck. This is the thing for the deck that you can do. I like to basically tutor this card up during the course of the game. Yes, it costs 8 mana. When it comes on the board, though, you have a 5/5 vehicle, flying, first strike, and vigilance. And when you have your commander out and you activate the crew ability for only 2, which you can use your commander for, you go to your attack step, you have a 5/5, flying, first strike, vigilance, and lifelink because of your commander vehicle that attacks, creates 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens that also have flying and vigilance. So you're swinging in for 13 damage with that attack right there. And it's also geometric growth, right? Every turn this is on the battlefield and it attacks, you're getting 2 more 4/4 white angels that stay around. And because of the vigilance, these are actually good because the angels can help you block so you don't take kind of a bounce back damage when the opponents choose to attack you back on their turns. And then also you have the 5/5, which can be crewed if necessary there. So that's the main theme here, is to be able to get this out. It's a lot of fun. But we also have a ton of other vehicles in the deck that we can utilize. And the main advantage being, this card right here is an example. This has crew 6. It is a 7 power, 11 toughness card, which usually you would not be able to crew because it crews 6 cost. But with your crew 2 ability from your commander, you can basically play this card on turn 1, turn 2, play a mana rock, turn 3, play Kotori, use Kotori to crew this ability, and you're attacking with a 7/11 lifelink and vigilance vehicle artifact creature. So that's pretty good right there. And this deck wins through combat damage, right? We're playing at a level where we're not going for these infinite combos and everything is like that. We're playing regular old school Magic. You attack, you swing, and you deal damage to your opponents. So this is the prime example of what you can do with the vehicles in this deck. We also have a card like Colossal Plow, which is just a great name, so it always gets a laugh just from playing that. But this one is a 6/3 for only 2 mana. The crew normally ability is 6, but again, the commander lessens that ability. So what you do is you attack and you add 3 white and gain 3 life until end of turn. You don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So you can set up for a pretty big turn there. And again, the life gain allows you to stay in the game when you're getting crackbacks from people when you're attacking them with your vehicles. One of the main drawbacks with vehicles is that once you cast your vehicle and then you have to wait a turn because it has summoning sickness, So on the next turn, you have to tap another smaller creature to crew the vehicle. This can still be targeted by removal, and then you have to actually go and swing and get in through combat damage. So there's a lot of chances there for the opponents to do board wipes or interact at instant speed to remove your strong cards after you've already crewed them. It's one of the inherent drawbacks with this deck and why the power level is not going to be up there, 6, 7, 8s, right? So this is another example here. We have a 6/6 crew 4 for 2 mana. Another target vehicle you control becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. The benefit of this is that sometimes your commander will get destroyed and you are not able to crew your vehicles. You don't have a creature out, maybe you don't have your commander. So what you can do is you can use the ability on this to effectively crew one of your vehicles. It makes it into a creature and it can attack. We have Aradara Express, a 8/6 menace. Early on when that's swinging and it has menace, not everybody has 2 blockers on the board to be able to block it, so it can get in for a lot of damage. Smuggler's Copter. This one right here, when it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, you discard a card. So basically you can filter through your deck and help find the card you need for that precise moment. It's also hitting for 3 damage when it hits. Prodigy's Prototype. Whenever 1 or more vehicles you control attack, create a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token. This creature crews vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. So it crews vehicles as though it were a 3/3. So this is just good to have around with these pilots as easy tap abilities for your crewing. Now, Shorikai Genesis Engine was the alternate commander on the precon. It's a great card by itself. If you make a deck around this, this can go all the way to CEDH polymorph decks with this commander, but that's not what we're doing here. Here, we're getting an 8/8 that instead of crew 8, we're crewing for 2, and we can swing in with an 8/8, which is pretty good. Also has the nice card draw ability that also creates token on your side. This basically does everything that we need to do in our vehicle deck. Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. This is one of my favorite vehicles because right on it, it has removal. It has a way to do direct damage, 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker and opponent controls. It's also nice that it hits planeswalkers as well, because this deck, you really need to get into the opponents for combat damage. If they have a ton of planeswalkers on the board, it's going to slow you down too much if you have to sit there and attack into the planeswalkers to slowly kill them. So you can utilize this one instead to pick them off. Deluxe Dragster. This one can't be blocked except by vehicles. And who's crazy enough to run vehicles besides us? No one. So this can get in pretty much every time. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell will be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. So if you need to, you can play a board wipe, you can play a draw cards instant or sorcery spell, you can play a Swords to Plowshares. The utility on this is huge, and it allows you to actually interact more with the board, and it makes the game more fun and more interesting. Weatherlight. I just love the lore on this because this is huge from the Urza Saga block, but it's a 4/5 attacker, and when it does combat damage to a player, you're looking at the top 5 cards of your library, revealing a historic card, which is a artifact or vehicle card. You can put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. So again, you're searching out more threats of your vehicles you can pick up once you deal combat damage. Surge Hacker Mech. Menace, 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to twice the number of vehicles you control to target creature or planeswalker, once again, an opponent controls. This is great because you really need some direct damage to kind of clear the board, or a problem creature or planeswalker that is out on the board. It's great to do this, but you usually have up to like 3 vehicles at that time, so it's 3 or 4 damage when it's coming out. It's a good utility right there. Imposter Mech. So sometimes you'll play decks that have some ridiculous cards in them, and this card is great to kind of even the playing field in that regard. When it enters the battlefield, it copies a creature an opponent controls, except it's a vehicle with crew 3 and loses all other card types. So let's say somebody has a Toxrill on the board, which is pretty toxic and just annihilating everybody and can win the game by itself by making slug tokens and killing all the other creatures. Well, you have a copy of that is not a creature, which is the easiest to remove, right? You have Terror, Swords to Plowshares. There's a million ways to destroy creatures, a little bit less to destroy artifacts, even less to destroy enchantments. And because it's an artifact, unless you crew it, you can just leave it there, gain the ability of whatever creature the opponent has that you really liked, and take advantage of that continuously. So those are our main vehicle cards in the deck and how we are attacking for a lot of damage. And again, we said we wanted the Death Star, right? Let me put the Death Star on top, the Parhelion, which is already on the top because it's on the side over here. The way we get Parhelion is important too, right? Because how are we going to get to this big card? We have a few tutor type of cards here. We have, and they're not expensive tutors, right? We're not playing Vampiric Tutor, like that kind of stuff, even though this isn't a black deck. We're not playing Enlightened Tutor. When Deadeye Quartermaster enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an equipment or vehicle card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So it's a 2/2, which is perfect because that's what your leader, your commander gives you for a crew ability. It can crew your vehicles, and you go search up this or maybe a Skystrip Sovereign or anything else you might need in that moment, but usually go for my win con there. We also have Fabricate. Search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your library. And we have Anchor to Reality. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Shouldn't really be a problem if you have your pilot tokens or something easy to sacrifice, even a mana rock or something like that. Search your library for the equipment card, put it onto the battlefield. Equipment or vehicle card onto the battlefield. This card is actually huge, and I guess it's not seeing quite as much use. It is 4 mana and it's a vehicle card, but in a vehicle deck, this is amazing. So you just put that Parhelion right onto the battlefield there. It's pretty amazing. So there we have, a few tutors that we like to utilize. And with that, I'd just like to also show some of the mana rocks, right? Because sometimes you need to get up there to be able to cast this big threat on the board. We have Soul Ring, your standard Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, Cultivator's Caravan with its questionable art, but can tap to add 1 mana of any color, can also attack as a 5/5 once you crew it. Vedalken Engineer, which is great in this deck, add 2 mana of any one color, spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. Well, that's all we're doing in this deck. Ornithopter of Paradise, taps for any color, can also be used as a blocker of last resort if you need it, and I know the power is not high enough to crew anything, but just the value of using it as a blocker when you have to, and extra mana is great. Palladium Mirror, you can tap to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. Also a 2/2, which is perfect for crewing vehicles. Liquid Metal Torque, add 1 colorless, or you can target a non-land permanent and make it an artifact until end of turn. Now this ability is great because it allows you to hit targets that you could only target an artifact, right? If you have destroy or exile target artifact or enchantment, and they have something that is not that, if it's a creature, you can make it into an artifact, and then you can cast your spell to get rid of it. So that is why this card has a nice little niche value there. Thran Dynamo, when you really want to get the big threats out, you get this on the board, and it ramps you 3 turns effectively. And we have the Urza's Destiny version here. Add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool. Some people get scared of this and they like to target it, so just be aware of that if you're going to play it. Sometimes people get scared and they try and kill it. Forsaken Monument, good in most colorless decks, also good in this deck because it's pumping our creatures, right? Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. When we crew a vehicle, it is now a creature. It now gets that pump. It also allows us to get extra mana from our mana rocks. And when we cast a colorless spell, including all of our vehicles, we gain 2 life. You see there is a lot of life gain in this deck, and that's good because it lets you attack and not care about getting hit back and worrying about your life total getting too low. So we have a few of those there. Let's also go through some of the cost reducers, right? And again, if you want to check out the full deck on Moxfield, you can search for Finx MTG on Moxfield, and it'll show you cards like this as cost reducers, targeted removal, the combo pieces. I'll have it separated out, and you can sort it in that manner. So you can just check that out if you want. Ethereum Sculptor, 2 mana. Your artifact spells cost 1 less to cast. Foundry Inspector, again, artifacts you cast cost 1 less, a 3/2, good for crewing vehicles. Thought Monitor, this card is great in any artifact deck. Anybody who plays an artifact deck knows about this one. It's 7 mana, but it has affinity for artifacts. So if you have 6 artifacts on the board, it costs 6 colorless less. So for 1 blue, you play this card, you draw 2 cards, you have a 2/2 flyer. Just a lot of fun, and it will always be discounted heavily just because of the design of the deck. Nice card draw. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, draw a card with Vedalken Archmage. This is another great one that really refills your hand and keeps the threats coming. So there we have some card draw and some mana reducers. We also have a few other card draw items like this one. SRAM Senior Edificer. When you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. We have to be able to refill our hand, and these serve multiple purposes because they can also crew our vehicles. One with the machine is a lot of fun. Like imagine you had a Parhelion on the board for 8 mana, and you cast one with the machine the next turn. Draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among artifacts you control, which would be 8 in that case, which would be amazing. But this card I've had really help me out a lot of times, and people don't expect it to be drawing 5, 6 cards or more, and it has a nice gameplay change there when you get to swing in a different direction. Padim Console of Innovation. This gives all of our other artifacts hexproof, which is important because people like to remove them after we crew them and tap our creatures and have nothing for blocks. Also, at the beginning of our upkeep, if you control the artifact with the highest converted mana cost or tied for the highest converted mana cost, draw a card. A lot of other decks are just running artifacts that are mana rocks, but we have significantly high cost vehicles and also standard artifacts that let us meet that criteria. Tezzeret, Artifice Master. 5 mana, comes in with 5 loyalty. And again, we're in a vehicle deck with lots of little chump blockers, and we can protect our Artifice Master here. And he can also make a 1/1 colorless stop their artifact creature token with flying, which is great because if you need a blocker, you can just pump that out there. You could also use that to crew vehicles. But the real ability here that we like is for 0 loyalty, draw a card if you control 3 or more artifacts. Draw 2 cards instead. So for 0, we're drawing 2 cards pretty much every turn. And I've had this able to close out games for me just because of so much card advantage coming from this and opponents not being able to attack through my giant vehicle blockers. Cosima, God of the Voyage. This has a lot of text on it, but the idea is that you exile this, and then every time you play a land, you may put a Voyager counter on it while it's in exile. So then when you return it to the battlefield, which you can do at any time later on, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it, and you draw X cards where X is the number of Voyage counters on it. So it's good for those slow games to really ramp you up to when they have a board wipe or something like that. Then you cast this guy, and you can get all of that card draw and kind of rebuild. Ghostly Pilferer, 2 mana, 2/1. Now these are the great cards to crew your vehicles because on this one, on this one specifically, this is a little bit separate. Let me go through this one. When it becomes untapped, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. So if you're in a slow game and you crew a vehicle and then this is going to your untap step, you untap it and you can pay 2 and you can draw a card there slowly. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, you also draw a card. So that means if they're playing any commanders, you draw a card. If they're playing one of those decks like Prosper or something like that that plays cards from exile, you draw a card. If they're playing anything like that, right? It just ends up drawing you several cards for a simple 2 mana card. I did have in here a Esper Sentinel previously. Now that card's got a little pricey, so I switched that one out for something more budget friendly, which was this one. Fallow Sage. This is actually, I've kept opening hands just because it had this card, because basically every time you crew your vehicle, you're drawing a card on this one, which is pretty awesome. And there you have some of your dudes that can crew your vehicles, draw cards, do a lot of good stuff. And then when you're swinging in for the vehicles, sometimes it's not enough to just hit for the damage you have, so you play a True Conviction. This is how you close out the game. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. And again, you see that lifelink mechanic is coming in here again. We're gaining a lot of life. Hard for the opponents to beat us down through combat damage, which should be the process at this power level. Tempered Steel. This is the budget, or not, this is the I guess the lesser version of True Conviction. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. So if we can't get True Conviction, we get this one out, or if they destroy the other one. Antiquities War. This one lets you keep searching for threats on the first saga from the top of your library. And then on the third one, it turns all of your artifacts into 5/5 creatures, and you can just swing for pretty much lethal, usually on one player, with all of your artifacts that are 5/5s. Cyberdrive Awakener from Cyberpunk apparently has flying 4/4. Other artifact creatures you control have flying. So this is a great finisher as well, because sometimes the board state gets clogged up. Everybody has creatures, or they have tokens, they have chump blockers. But if you give all of your big vehicles flying, you can then swing in for lethal, and because of the invasion, they can't stop it. Also, when this comes into the battlefield, it effectively crews all your vehicles by making them all base power and toughness 4/4 and into artifact creatures until end of turn. La Shield Clockwork Scholar. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control. This is great for when you want to swing in and you would normally take a lot of losses, right? You're swinging in to big creatures or something like that. You play this guy and you can still swing for the attack, which you need to do to win, and you don't lose all your creatures. Then it also has the ability, when one or more artifact creatures enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Just a nice little addition there as well. Kappa Cannoneer. This is a little trick card here. Well, people don't think that this is a threat, but when it comes out, and again, it's discounted, you can tap your artifacts to pay for the colorless mana cost here. It has Ward 4, and when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it can't be blocked. That's something that not everybody knows. This card actually sees itself enter the battlefield as an artifact, and then any artifact you play after that also gives it the +1/+1 counter and making it unblockable. The fact that you have at least a 5/5 that's unblockable, eventually that's going to get big enough to close out the game on somebody. Brilliant Restoration. This is if the game goes long and you have a lot of stuff that got board wiped. Maybe somebody played a Vandal Blast and you need to bring everything back from your graveyard back to the battlefield and get ready to attack again. Chroma's Will. I believe this is actually the most expensive card in the deck. The price went up on this one. But basically, you can cast this when you have your commander out. You choose both of the options. The creatures gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors, which means the opponent can't block unless they're playing a colorless Eldrazi deck. But usually the other player can't block because of the flying 2. There's evasion. They couldn't block it either. And the double strike and lifelink makes it so that you're gaining a ton of life. After you cast this and swing in with 3 vehicles or so, it should be hard for any opponents to win the game after that if they're not already knocked out there. So there you have some of the finishers, the pumpers that we can get through for that combat damage. But then the opponents, sometimes they get some stuff on the board that you really got to get rid of. So we bring in some removal. We have your standard Swords to Plowshares, a Path to Exile, just very standard removal that you need to exile cards. Generous Gift, again, this hits any permanent, including lands such as Field of the Dead or any of those annoying lands that do crazy tricks and it feels like it's not fair. You just hit it with a Generous Gift. Forsake the Worldly, exile target artifact or enchantment. When destroying is just not good enough. You can also cycle this card. I usually do not cycle this unless I have another removal spell in my hand. I usually just hold on to it because eventually I use that ability. Ugin the Ineffable. Colorless spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. So again, Parhelion would only be 6 mana just with this card out, which is pretty good. And this kind of does everything you want. You can manifest the top card of your library, and when it dies as a 2/2 creature, it goes to your hand. Or you can -3 destroy target permanent that's 1 or more colors. That's the biggest threat on the board effectively. Again, it's easier to defend the planeswalkers in this deck as well with the number of small creatures and vehicles that you have. And when you just want to say no, we have Dovin's Veto. This spell can't be countered, and you're countering their non-creature spell. So if it's a game-winning spell, you cast this, and then they're done. They can't get around it. Also, if you just feel like somebody's going to storm off and play a lot of spells on their turn, they said, oh man, I'm ready to do my big play this turn. They play their Mana Rock to get started. You can play this, Render Silent, counter target spell. Its controller can't cast spells this turn. This one is a little bit harsh, but when you know somebody's going for a win on their turn, it's a lot of fun to be able to cast this on something that they play as just setting up. Maybe they're casting their Tutor or, again, their Mana Rock, and then they can't play anything else that turn. They effectively have to pass. So we only have 2 counter spells there, but you see we do have some nice removal abilities. And we also have board wipes because sometimes it gets too cluttered. You got to clear it out. Supreme Verdict destroys all creatures and it can't be countered. I always like this card. We also have Settle the Wreckage. When there are cards that are coming back from the graveyard or just a big problem, like the Aristocrats decks, we need to sometimes exile those creatures. And usually people do not see this one coming. They do not see an instant board wipe coming on the attack steps, right? So if they're not attacking you, that's fine. Let them go in, let them hit the opponents. We want the opponents to have their life getting whittled down because that helps our strategy. Then when they attack us and they think they're attacking us for big damage, that's when you play this instant speed removal to exile those creatures. It does give them lands. So if they have a commander that's like a Voltron commander or somebody that's important to their situation, just be aware that they're basically always going to be able to cast their commander after that because of the land ramp. And that's the one big, I guess, issue with that card, but still great, and I like to utilize it in this type of deck. We also have some utility cards here. Thopter Spy Network. If you control an artifact on your upkeep, you make a 1/1 Thopter. You should always have an artifact out, so that's always going on. Whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. That works great with vehicles, works great with the Thopters, which also have geometric growth because every turn you're making a 1/1 Thopter. And if you have to, eventually that's going to close out the game by itself. Keeper of the Accord. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. And at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you can fetch a plains. So basically this is like a bit of a catch-up card here, but it ensures if the opponents get too far ahead, you can start being able to utilize this guy to make your crew guys or to get lands to ramp up. And again, keep in mind, even the Thopter Spy Network, it's 1/1 creatures, but when you have True Conviction out or you have Tempered Steel, you're pumping those cards up and they're able to swing in for a lot more damage. We also have Felidar Retreat. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. Create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token if you need to crew, but also you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. So keep in mind with this one, if you crew your vehicle and you attack, or before you attack, then you play your land, you can put a +1/+1 counter on it, right? So this one will be included. When it turns into a standard vehicle artifact at the end of turn, the +1/+1 counter stays on this card. It does not get removed. So when you crew this again, it already has those +1/+1 counters on it. That's a little mechanic that's sharp to, or it's good to keep in mind when utilizing this card here. We also have some fun cards like Mirror Battlesphere, 7 mana, 4/7. It makes a bunch of little dudes when you comes into the battlefield. But then when you attack, you may tap them so that it gets +X/+0 until end of turn and deals X damage to defending player. So it's a way to directly shoot like little lightning bolts at the defending player and whittle down the life total further. Mirage Mirror. Again, this is great because you can copy a target artifact, creature, enchantment, or land until end of turn. It doesn't have to be on your side of the battlefield. If the opponent has better creatures than you, an artifact that's going to win the game, you can just copy it with this. This works great. And if not, you're just copying one of your giant 7-11 vehicles right here, and then you're attacking with 2 7-11s, which is good enough by itself there. Katsumasa, the Animator. Flying 3/3. Until end of turn, target non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature and gains flying. If it's not a vehicle, which we don't care because it will be. So the idea is for 3 mana, we can crew a vehicle with this card. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 3 target non-creature artifacts, which again has this crazy synergy with the vehicles because you're putting the counters on there, and then when they become a creature, the counters are really effective. Shimmermere is great because you cast artifact spells as though they had flash. There's a couple more expensive non-budget versions of this card, like Karn the Liberator Battle Thopter, something like that. Not Karn, it's Liberator Battle, Urza's Battle Thopter. Has the same type of an effect. But basically, you play this card. During an opponent's turn, you play Consulate Dreadnought. When your commander is already out, when it gets to your turn, you can either tap your commander or tap your Shimmermere. This no longer has Summoning Sickness. Swing in for the damage. A great way to get out some big creatures pretty fast like with that. Master of Ethereum. This one has power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts you control. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1, so it's another pumper as well. Bronze Guardian. 5 mana, double strike, ward 2, but it gives all the other artifacts you control ward 2. and the power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. And again, remember that double strike is effectively first strike, and then it attacks again in the second combat step with that. So if you're going up against something and you have, let's say, 5 artifacts on the board, if it has 5 toughness or less, it's immediately going to die and not even deal the damage to Bronze Guardian. So this is a great way to be able to always swing in with this guy. Also protects your other team members on the board. So there you have the vehicle Kotori deck right there. That's all of the main items in the deck. We also have some lands that are utility lands. Not that many, of course. We have a lot of basic lands in here, but Mizra's Factory, you can turn this into a 2/2 creature and it can crew a vehicle, or you can just swing with it if you want to. Great to get around board waves because, again, you're doing this on your turn and it turns into a land at the end of turn. Ijano, Seed of the Empire. You can just deal 4 damage to attacking or blocking creature. Treasure Vault's good to be able to build up on a turn so that the next turn you can cast a ton of spells in one turn. I like to use that after I draw some cards with the Tezzeret or other cards. Hallowed Fountain, just because you need a dual land type of card. And then your other ones are pretty staple. This one, because you have so many artifacts, you should always use the second ability on this. Temple of False God, Exotic Orchard, Command Tower. And then you have a ton of Kamigawa basics. There you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, check out the full list on Moxfield. Thanks for watching. This has been a deck tech for Kotori Pilot Prodigy. Wonder if there's any new cards that you guys seen that have come out that you'd like to put in instead. I wish the vehicle mechanic was used a little bit more, you know. They tried to do the saddle mechanic in the newer set to try and bring it back a little bit. They're trying to make it work, but this is fun at this power level. So I enjoy it. I enjoy gaining life. I enjoy making little vehicles that attack. Hope you enjoyed the video. Adios.